I'm here with Jacob Wheeler, 2012 Forrest Wood Cup champion, and almost did it again in 2013. You started off a little bit slow, but each day you got consistently better. What changed after day one there?
You know, I really committed to a couple areas. You know, in practice, you have 3 days of full practice, and you learn a lot and you figure out a lot. But in the tournament, you really feel what those fish are doing and what's going on, the best way to catch the biggest bass possible. You know, my girlfriend after day one, she said, "Hey, those are some baby bass," when I weighed them, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, I got to catch them bigger." And so I went and did what I love to do. I love to go throw a frog, punch with a trigger X skew bug, and throw a wacky rig in those areas. Those backwaters that had those lily pads had a little bit of grass. It made it to where I could catch, just some bigger fish. I felt like those were the bigger bites, but it was a deal later in the day, those fish bit. First thing in the morning, that first day I ran to my backwaters that I got a lot of bites in practice, never got a bite, caught a couple, I think I caught a couple fish on the flutterworm, but never caught a quality bite. And so I sort of abandoned that. I said, well, maybe I got to salvage a day, so I run back out to the main river, catch 40 fish, but they're just, pound and a quarters, pound and a half, and it never worked out to where what I needed, So, I mean, it's been a pretty crazy week, though.
Well, you spoke about bluegill. What was the key with the bluegills?
Okay, the key was the bluegill. That's their forage base back in those backwaters. So there's a few shad back in some of them, but in the ones that I was fishing, they were really shallow, so they didn't have a lot of depth. The shad stayed in those places that had more depth. So if you had more depth in your backwater, there would be a shad pattern too. But the bluegill were their main forage, and when you get way back in those backwaters, you could hear those bluegill sucking on those pads. In the certain areas, those were the areas where bass were staying in there. And they were going to, because that's where their forage was, that's where they could eat all the time. They didn't have to worry about bait leaving, and that was important. But what would happen was it had to have a ditch, it had to have a couple ditches, and those deeper depressions where those bass could pull off and sit out there in those holes and relax, and then they'd pull up on top of the flats on those ridges in 2, 3 foot, 4 foot of water where those bluegill were at. Those bluegill would spawn out there. That's where they would spawn this time of year, out there in those holes and those pads, because that's the only place that the light will penetrate to where those fish can, those bluegill can actually spawn. And so those bass got in there, and they'd eat them when they wanted to, and they'd pull off. It was a buffet. Why wouldn't they be there? So that was the key with the bluegill. They were back in those backwaters and those holes, and that's where they, that's why the bass were there.
Well, excellent showing. 2012 Forrest Wood Cup champion and finished in second place this year in 2013.